Hi, welcome back to another podcast episode on the Normal to Nomad podcast.
This week we are going to be talking about cheers.
You stole my cup. That's
This
my
week
cup.
we're going to be talking about our house design and building materials and different building types that we might use and all things of that nature. Am I missing anything?
Nope, I think we're just going to be talking all about our house.
Cool. To start, we have a general layout that we've kind of been talking about and designing. You had it in one of your journals that you'd been kind of ideating on for a long time, and we just put that into Sketchup. I need to open that file and geek out on it again and kind of finish it up. But
I'll put it on YouTube as we talk about it. I'll put it on the YouTube video, so if you want to see what that looks like, get on YouTube.
yeah, but if you're if you're just listening, then we'll do our best to describe it as well. The biggest thing for our house design is having, kind of like in our office, having south-facing windows so that we can have an in-house greenhouse. That's one of the major sort of design features that we want to incorporate. And then concrete floors too. But
because the main thing we're working with is a bunch of sun. So we're thinking concrete, and we'll talk more about this later. But we want concrete to be able to absorb that sun and then release that heat in the night.
And in Ben Falk's book, Modern Farm and Homestead or something to that effect, he talks about the different zones, your different growing zones. And the ones that you like pass by day to day are your zone 0. So by having our initial growing site in our house, then we will be interfacing with it every day. So that'll give us a better chance to really take care of it. Whereas if it were off site or further down the hill or even outside, then we're not going to see it every day. So then we won't be able to give it as much care.
We want to have 2 stories ideally, because Barron is really into tall, which I'm into that too, for sure.
That, and we had an apartment it was our first place that we ever lived together. And it was a teeny tiny apartment, but it had 2 stories. Like it was just our bedroom upstairs. And that really gave us a sense of separation that was nice. So Elsa could be upstairs doing her face painting stuff, and I could be downstairs doing whatever I'm doing. And we kind of each had our own space. And I like that ability, especially for when we have kids, to be able to put the kid down upstairs or whatever, and then still be able to live our lives downstairs.
So what we're thinking for the downstairs is, and this will be a very small house. I don't know what the square footage is like yet. We're working with some really awesome friends, Dylan and Casey, on this kind of design, and none of this is official. It's just what we have come up with, and now we're going to kind of interface with them and see how we can make this a reality. But on the first floor, we will have our kitchen and a completely open area. We love transformable furniture. So things that can have more than one purpose, I think, is going to dominate that space. Really big open kitchen. And behind the kitchen, we'll have to have some sort of pantry because we plan on having a lot of stored food. But behind the kitchen area is a bathroom, pantry, kind of wet room.
The mudroom.
Mudroom, that's what it's called. And behind that, to the north, maybe will be a garage. We haven't decided on where we want to put that. I had a good friend who said that will be a very cold garage if it's only on the north side. So,
but it'll also be like an insulative sort of area to the house. So the garage can be cold, but then there's air barrier to the house.
And it will be
nice.
warmer than it would be outside, better protected than just outside.
And we feel like a garage is a necessity, just to have a space out of the wind and out of the snow and everything to process food and work on vehicles and all that kind of stuff.
Our kind of goal is to work on the garage first and live in the garage, like James and Doreen, live in the garage with a little kind of kitchen type setup while we then go and build the house. And then in the future, that garage with its little kitchen setup will become our game processing area. So kind of thinking ahead with that. You mentioned the greenhouse that we have on the first floor.
And that will just bleed into our main living area. Like Elsa said, it'll be kitchen, mudroom and everything behind that, but the main area will just be an open room that spills into the greenhouse.
Yes.
And kind of built around our wood stove, I guess. And hopefully all the furniture, like you said, will be transformable and be able to move around.
And adapt based on what we're doing.
We were thinking kind of a rolling island for the kitchen that would also be a sort of bar setup so you could sit in chairs, and that would maybe be our kitchen table, just an up-high bar/island that we can also use for storage.
And in that legendary first apartment that we had with the 2 floors.
It was hardly legendary.
Well, it was to us to have our first apartment together. It was pretty cool. There were floating stairs in that apartment. So we had my tegu cage, a big old huge box underneath those stairs. We wouldn't bring the tegu back for this house, but we would like to have floating stairs to make everything feel really big and open, because this is going to be really, really small.
And we need some kind of roaming reptile. I haven't decided on what yet. Maybe a tortoise.
We haven't talked about that yet. Or
tokay geckos just living free and wild in the house so they could take care of mice and bugs. We'll see.
We'll see. How about that? Then as you go up the stairs, there's going to be a little tiny loft area. And this will face the east where the mountains are. Beautiful, beautiful open view of the mountains. It'll be a loft because it'll be open. You can see over it down to the floor below. The wood stove pipe will kind of extend all the way up, so you'll have that heat up into the loft. And I think that loft will be a space where we can pull out a trundle bed or a futon and have guests sleep there. It won't be the most private thing ever, but we don't have very many guests here anyway.
Well, I feel like once our house is done, more people will be coming out here to visit.
And that's been something that we have been struggling with. Is I do believe that's the case for sure. And so we've been kind of trying to design a house based on people and guests and stuff. But then we forget that we need to focus on ourselves first and what we need in a house first, and then maybe do add-ons, do a guest house, things like that. But we were getting a little bit stuck trying to plan this house for other people.
But we will also have the scamp outside. So if people come to visit, they can stay in the scamp. Which some people wouldn't like, but then it's like, okay, then you can not come.
Well, it would be the most dreamy thing, and I'm really kind of trying to fight for this, is to get another scamp and have that be, I don't know, a little nest, so that we can have just a couple little apartments for people who are coming and going. Because we're going to have ongoing projects here all the time.
And we would like to be able to host people in the scamps that are trying to move into a sort of nomadic way of living, so that people could try it out and get a sense of what that would be like for them.
Offer it kind of like an Airbnb experience type of thing, where you get to see what it takes. If you are wanting to become nomadic, we've got it set up for you. Everything but the moving part, which is a big part.
Yeah.
But you can figure that out.
But I think it'd be a really good introduction for people. Okay, so we were talking about the loft, and above the living room area and where the wood stove is, it would go straight through. Like there won't be a second story in that part.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about above the wood stove.
Okay.
It'll just go straight through to the upper floor ceiling. So then that area will have a really high ceiling, and then the loft will be off to the side up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're thinking our bedroom would go over top of the kitchen area.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. And I think from the... Okay, backwards. Let's go backwards a bit. One of the biggest things that we... oh no, kombucha is a bad bubbly drink to drink when we're podcasting. Hold on. Excuse me. The biggest thing that we have wanted from the start is a bunch of decks. We want to not have a house that then limits our time spent outside. That's been our whole thing with the scamp is where we sleep and exist, but outside is where we really live. So we don't want to take that away by having a house. So we want to be able to sit out on really any side of the house and be protected from the wind, from the sun, depending on where you're at.
And having multiple decks may seem extra to people, but the wind changes directions a lot out here, and the sun moves around through from season to season. Like in the summer, we probably won't want to be in the sun, whereas in the winter we will. So being able to be outside on different sides of the house, and especially the roof, is what I'm interested in. To have a flat roof that's just a big sort of communal space, I think will be really cool. Just like the house we stayed in Puerto Rico.
That nobody knows about.
Right, but you do. So
Yes,
maybe we could describe it. It was a concrete house, which is kind of what we're considering building. And the roof was totally flat, but it drained. It drained all the water off clearly. And above the stairs, they had an even higher sort of pergola, I guess. I don't know, just to protect the stairs. And I thought that was so cool to climb up just one layer higher and be up on that. So, I don't know. I just love being up high. And being able to see 360 around us, I think will be so cool from the
We've
roof.
got the most incredible views.
Yeah.
Most incredible. We
But-
will have a deck, so when you come up to the loft, you'll be able to access. And again, these are just, this is
Ideas.
just ideas that we really want to make happen. Everything could change. You get up on the loft, you can then access a deck, a very narrow, thin deck, spot for a couple chairs and a little table, that's going to be right on top of the little greenhouse. And then you can walk up the stairs around the west side of the house that then take you to the roof deck. If you go into our bedroom, you can then access the deck on top of the garage, which is that same floor level. So a roof deck, but a lower level.
And we're thinking, since we will likely be building out of concrete blocks initially, which we haven't really talked about, we'll have those flat spaces on the roof portions of any of the house. So we might as well use those as living space too, rather than just having them be a canted angle that drains.
So this is currently planning on being a 1-bedroom house. 1.5 bedroom.
Because of the loft, right?
Then in the future, we may add a couple rooms or something onto the west side of the house. And we would like to plan this whole house. Like I said, we want to start by living in the garage. We want to plan this house so that we are doing it in stages, piece by piece, because we want to do it with only what we can afford. So very little bit by little bit.
And what we were considering too is if building the second floor ends up being too much complexity initially, we can build that first room by itself with the greenhouse. And then whenever we save up enough money to finish the upper portion, we can go ahead and tack on the second floor.
And anything that we do is going to feel like a mansion to us. So the size is not at all a factor. A
And to it-
2-story garage is going to be huge for us.
And what we were talking about too for the living room is having space.
I meant 2-car garage, not 2-story. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, but it'll probably be relatively tall. But in the living room, even having a slide out bed there, and one of the designs that we've really liked is you have a little raised portion that kind of makes a separate room that we could even have just be like a sort of deck material for like
a little
doing
step
yoga and
up.
stuff. Yeah. But it makes a mental sort of separation between a space that would otherwise be all one floor. And then from that little block on the ground, you can slide out a bed.
A little trundle bed.
Yeah. And that could even be where we sleep initially while we're saving money to build the second floor if we end up not being able to afford all that out of the gate.
Oh, something I didn't mention too was in the bedroom, the main bedroom, the only bedroom. We would like for that not to be a closed off wall to the lower floor. We want that to be open too. So we're thinking have some sort of a curtain
Sliding.
or shades or sliding barn door for if we were to put a kid down in the room, we could close that. But for the most part, it would be always open because then it would get the south sun. During the winter especially would be very important into our bedroom.
And we could see out over top of the greenhouse from our bedroom, which would be really cool.
It would be so cool.
I'm kind of stuck on the design that we made, but
I
I'm
know.
totally open
Well,
to.
what Dylan and Casey can help us do is turn kind of the dimensions that you made, turn it into a more accurate kind of format.
Hmm.
And we could make things a little bigger, a little smaller with their help. And they, I think, will help us figure out how much of what supplies we need. And I hope that they'll just be here doing the whole thing with us.
Yeah. The program that I'm using for the design is called Sketchup. And if you get the 2017 version, if you Google it, you can find the 2017 version that Sketchup still offers, because it used to be totally free software. And now it's pretty expensive if you want the desktop version. But you can use the new version in your browser for free, I believe. But if you want to download a desktop version that has everything you need really and is free, the 2017 version is available, and that's what I've been using, and it works great. And you have a tape measure, and you can build to specific dimensions. So as I was building out a refrigerator, for example, or the toilet or the sink, I was Googling dimensions for exactly what size those things are, and then I could measure them out and bring them into the model, so all of our things within the model are actually to scale, as far as our bed, even pillows and all that kind of stuff.
I can't believe you did that. You just worked one whole day on it and designed a house for us.
Yeah, I'd wanted to use SketchUp for a long time, but I never had a project that I needed to do. It was always like, what contrived arbitrary thing could I try to build out in this that I don't need? But now that we're designing a house, it gave me the motivation to really dig into it.
Are there any other elements of the house that we are forgetting? Oh, you know what would be so funny that we've talked about is kids will, like, I don't know, they'll sleep close to you for a while, right, when they're young. But then once they turn 5, build them a cabin to go live in by themselves. Is that something that a 5-year-old could do, would want to do?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but maybe like an 8-year-old or 10-year-old.
I think it depends on how our kid turns out. They could be super independent or they could be super clingy.
But build with them their own little space, just like this office here. Build this with them and then have it kind of be their space, because the house, we have not had rooms in 5 years. We have lived in one space together. And I think that that's really cool. The idea of rooms and separateness is something that I'd like to stay away from. I want to have a closer family than, I don't know, than I'm used to. I want us all to be close and together as much as possible, with ways to be private.
Well, and there will always be outside.
For sure.
I think we will still spend a lot of time outside and build our space so that it sort of encourages you to be outside on the decks and everything. Make the deck space super inviting and kind of makes you, I don't know, kind of pushes you outside. I think that'll be really neat.
Right. But the inside is, I'm just really in love with the idea currently to keep it as open as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Even with friends coming to stay, pulling out a bed for them on the main floor. I don't know. I just think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Or the loft.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the loft is for it to be a bedroom of its own to some extent. Not that it's hardly a bedroom because it'd be open, but it's at least a place for people to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Keep stuff, lounge, look out the windows.
Yeah.
What's next?
The location maybe, because that's something that we're still kicking around.
Mm-hmm.
It will be so much more complex to build up here on the very top of our land, the highest point, but it's so cool that we're thinking we might eat the complexity of it and build up here. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's so quiet up here, and you can't see the scamp anymore from the road. You used to be able to, in our spot down a bit lower, you could hear cars going by. But up here, it's just so private. We're so far away from the road, and we're so high that all the views in every direction are incredible.
And if we had it 2 stories, we could even see out to the, west as well, which there are some
stunning,
amazing mountains over there too.
We're just going to have to really try hard figuring out. We may have to spend a good bit of money to make water come up here from down below. We couldn't have our well drilled any higher because they couldn't get the machines up here, or the well drilling machine. And I mean, we would have, how many feet higher do you think we are right now? Like 50 to
If
100?
we're going straight up,
Yeah, from our last spot.
yeah, 50 to 100 feet max.
So that would have been an extra
Oh, interesting.
2 to 4
I
grand
hadn't thought
to
about
drill.
that. Yeah. I hadn't thought about how much deeper it would be if we came up the hill further.
Yeah. I think it was like 35 a foot or something like that. It was like $28 to $35 a foot or something for drilling our well. So if we added 100 feet onto that, it would have made it a bit more expensive.
And we're still kicking around ideas as far as how we will manage the well. And having a booster pump up top, like above the well maybe, might be how we send water all the way up here, or we could have a cistern. But I think we covered that pretty well, and I don't know that we have really more development since then.
In the last podcast.
Yeah, but since we use so little water, I'm not as worried about our well as I would be if I were a normal American.
Or like
probably.
coming straight from our lives in Kansas City to
Yeah.
an off-grid lifestyle.
Yeah, because we've gotten so used to being conservative with our water that with a decent-sized cistern, that'll last us a long time as long as we're conscious of our shower usage and stuff.
Over the last 5 years, the most water that we would carry around with us at a time was 12 gallons at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us a lot of great experience for this lifestyle, where if we have a big-ass cistern, we're going to be set.
Yeah, and we just met some friends. I was actually at the hardware store a few months ago, and someone yelled at me in the parking lot, like, "Hey, Barron." And I was like, I don't know anybody here, so I don't know what this could be. But Travis is the guy's name, and he's an electrician and super smart dude, and he's building out, or has already built out, his own off-grid setup, and we just went and visited him and his girlfriend, Cora, and they loaned us a couple water barrels that are around 35 gallons, and also said that if we needed to, we could borrow their, I believe it's 1,000-gallon cistern.
That would last us all year.
Yeah. So we could haul that up here near the scamp and build around it to kind of get it underground so it doesn't freeze up. And then we could slowly fill that up with a pump that we would pump out of the 35-gallon barrels. And then we'd have all the water that we ever need. So a solution like that, then if you transfer that to the house, would really accommodate us pretty well. And
every time we were to run a shower or something, we'd just have to be cognizant of how much we were pulling and how long we were taking a shower for, and maybe take showers on days that we filled a cistern or something.
And I would like to set up some kind of digital system where we can use Arduinos and Raspberry Pis or something to that effect to monitor all these systems so that we could see the water level in our cistern and the charge capacity on our solar kit and all those types of things. I think that'd be really neat and totally possible. Even with our garden, having humidity sensors in the soil and temperature sensors in the garden and everything too, and then being able to have those on switches, like if it goes below X degrees in the garden, then open up the blinds or start running water underneath the different things like that are totally possible, and I think that'd be really fun to figure out.
So like we said, we are really pretty stuck to the cement concrete idea for this house. We love adobes, and that is a really big and popular design
building technique out here.
Yes, out here in Colorado where we're at. So I think adobe bricks would be a lot more expensive than cement bricks. We would ideally like to make them ourselves, but we don't have the correct land. You need sand, mud, all the various things to create your own bricks, and we unfortunately do not have that terrain. So we had our friends James and Doreen, the ones who helped us build this office. They built their house out of cement blocks, and we love their house. It's not just cement. They have,
it looks like adobe,
wood pillars. It's a stunning house, and kind of, I think their concrete floors are stained red or something.
Kind of an off brown.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's beautiful.
And then the concrete floor acts as a thermal battery. So with all their windows, it just bakes the concrete floor. And then overnight, it slowly releases that energy and keeps the house warm.
We don't know for sure, though, if there's another technique that we could do if we were to put up forms. We could put up a bunch of forms, then fill those forms and make walls. And that's all.
Out of concrete.
Out of concrete.
The issue, I think, there is that we would need a lot of concrete at a time to fill those forms. And to get a concrete mixing truck up here, I think would be borderline impossible. So we're going to be mixing a lot of the concrete
Did
ourselves.
you not see at the mountain?
Yeah, but that's...
How do you think they got cement all the way up there?
I don't know. It'd be quite difficult.
At the ski resort that we go snowboarding at. I think it could be possible.
Well,
and
it's
by
definitely
seeing
possible.
by seeing that building up there, it was very clearly made by forms and filled with concrete. I wonder if there's a company around. I think cement blocks will be so much fun. I am dying to do that process. But if there's a company around here who would know how to put those forms up and we could potentially do it a little faster, that would be interesting. But there's so much that goes into putting those forms up to make them seal correctly. Even the mixtures of concrete. There's all kinds of ways that you can mix concrete to do different things if you're going to use it for walls or for foundation. So that will change things, whereas the cement blocks are what they are, and then you fill it with what you fill it with.
We fill it with concrete and rebar or mortar, which is just a different mix of concrete.
You have to stick the blocks together, glue them together. I guess it's a very similar process to Adobe, except you got to fill it.
So not a lot of people build with concrete blocks like this, but I think it's a good solution for us because the whole thing then acts as a thermal battery. And since we are working with so much sun out here, we can leverage that and keep the house warm and then also cool, because overnight the blocks suck up the cool air. And
so in the summer it would remain cooler.
Right. It's as long as we block out the windows.
And yes, that was what I meant to say earlier, is that in the greenhouse we will have to use some Earthship type principles to design it so that we can easily close windows when we need to close windows. I'm so cold. Should I take this off?
No, I just didn't want your collar brushing the mic.
It's a pretty excessive little jacket. Somebody commented on our very first podcast, you were wearing a jacket. And they said, "You're indoors, why are you wearing a jacket?" But this space is still not heated.
And we don't have it totally caulked up.
No, there's still work to be done in here, but it's been great.
So we got on this tangent from building locations. And something else that will be probably difficult up here or anywhere on our land is septic. So that's just a thing that we need to figure out. And if anybody is a septic nerd, then let us know. But we'd like to get some sort of amendment or pass to use an incinerating toilet, because I think that's even cleaner and less complex. But I'm not sure that we'll be able to get...
I don't think so. I don't have high hopes.
No, I don't either. I'm just saying ideally that would be really cool.
Or even composting.
Yeah.
I very much, we talked about this in the last episode, I very much understand why the rules are in place.
Yeah, because people do stupid stuff.
Yeah, and you have a ton of people on the planet. So you got to be managing waste correctly. But we're out here on a 40-acre lot, and so it would be very cool if we could do some human manure, grow some trees with composted poop. But that's a little bit out there for...
It's a little progressive for...
the area that we live.
Yeah.
And again, just for most areas, it's a kind of a big...
Because within the same county and everything, there are people that live on quarter-acre lots in the town and everything. So they have to make rules around that accommodate everyone. So
we understand. I just don't want to go and rip up our lot to put a poop funneling station. Big old holes, a leach field.
We'll likely have to, but I would like to do it as simply as possible. So that's something that we're still researching heavily. If anybody is a septic genius.
And the problem we're working with too is that we're going to be having to put a septic tank probably above ground because we are on top of solid rock.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And it is like 3 times the price to do an above ground septic system because you got to haul in a bunch of gravel. Oh, man, that's going to be the biggest pain in the rear is septic. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Once we get it done, though, then it's done. Unless the system is forcibly complex, and then we'll have to be maintaining it and changing out pumps and paying for it over and over again, which I'm dreading. Different subject.
We are very proud to announce that we have some sponsors today. The first sponsor,
ElsaRhae.com.
if you are looking for a beautiful sticker, a wooden sticker, a cute-ass little pin to decorate your backpack, a scarf, your shirt, go to ElsaRhae.com, where you can find all of these things and sometimes more when I've made other things and have them up for sale on my website. Thank you so much, ElsaRhae.com.
For not paying us. And
We really appreciate it. The next sponsor, who we are so excited to have today, is normal2nomad.com. You can go to normal2nomad.com to find all kinds of resources on nomadic living, and
soon a book that you can purchase.
And it's, let me tell you, it is going to be a really freaking awesome book.
Oh.
I'm not just saying that. It's so good. I can't wait.
And our Patreon is through Normal to Nomad. So if you want to support us for all the content that we create and everything, then you're welcome to through those avenues, but don't feel obligated at all.
Thank you to our sponsors. Back to the show.
So potential building materials, we talked about cinder block and adobe, and that's for the design that we're currently considering. And none of this is set in stone. See what I did there? But
is there stone in cement? Sand.
Yeah. So all of the other building options are still totally on the table. Like, we're not stuck to anything. And as far as those go, we'll kind of run through other building options that we've considered and give you the pluses and minuses of them. And one thing that I've seen a video that actually multiple people have shared with me, but I had found it on my own before that, is the hempcrete in like Lego blocks that this older gentleman, I believe he's in Canada, is advertising. And I think those would be really cool. They're really similar to our concrete block idea, but made out of hemp. And it's like fire retardant and all kinds of stuff. It's really cool.
Aren't they really lightweight too?
Yeah.
Would they have the same ability to retain heat?
I don't know.
Stuff?
But I think they would work better as an insulator than a thermal battery.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not entirely sure on that. And speaking of, with the concrete, what James and Doreen did is they built a frame on the outside of their concrete structure, and it was sort of an exhalation, where insulation is on the inside. Exhalation is a word that I made up, I think, that is insulation on the outside. So that way, when all of the sunlight and everything is coming, and your wood stove running is warming up the inside and heating up all those thermal batteries in the rock, essentially, that's around your house, then the insulation goes on the outside. So what they did is they built a little stick frame, sort of, on the outside of their house, and then they spray foam the inside of that, and then put stucco on the outside of that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Another insulation material for the outside that I've been looking at is corkboard, which is, I don't know, makes a lot of sense to me because bugs don't eat it, and it's an excellent insulator, and it's relatively affordable, and it looks really cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other building materials. The first thing that we came across was logs, for like a log cabin.
Yes, you were really, really wanting the log cabin thing to happen.
They're so nostalgic and cool. I think they just fit this landscape so well.
And there's a lot of log cabins around here too.
Yeah.
And they are really awesome. But then you go and talk to the people who have the log cabins, and they say that the maintenance and upkeep is a nightmare.
Yeah, they don't love them. And they're not super insulative. And if you do put insulation inside of them, then you have to sort of delete the look of the log cabin, because part of the cool thing of having a log cabin is being able to see the logs on the inside. Whereas if you hang drywall and put insulation behind it, then you can't see that anymore. So that kind of sucks.
And we also don't live near any tall pine trees. So that could have been something that influenced our decision, is if we had a bunch of the logs near us.
Yeah.
But we don't. We'd have to get them sent in, and seems like there's other more efficient ways that we could design a house.
I think, though, for a smaller house, like if we wanted to build a guest house, for example, a log cabin might make sense if it was really small, because there are local people that are log cabin builders. They could build it on site, then bring it here, reassemble it, and it's done.
Well, we would also probably one day enjoy going through that process of building our own log cabin.
And we could just get a bunch of logs delivered. And
yeah, so something that's more of a place, an experience for people to stay would be really fun.
Yeah. But for now, I don't think it makes the most sense, unfortunately. That said, though, we will use logs for our like post and beam construction to
I want to see
support
some raw logs.
For sure.
Some beetle kill.
In the corners of our house, and to use them as like I-beams that span the center parts of the house.
I'm really inspired by the aesthetic of metal, wood, and stone, concrete. So I think we will include all those elements in some form or another.
And we have so much stone out here, it would be really neat to incorporate it into
lava rock.
Yeah, into the sort of stucco of our house. Even if it were just a facade, just to make use of the natural material, I think would be really cool.
Absolutely. Earthship is something that's another really similar kind of home concept that we are considering and need to learn more about, because the principles and kind of the design features in Earthship homes are so cool, so functional. So we want to study more of those. I think we're going to probably go to New Mexico and stay in a couple of them just for science, to learn about what they're like and the advantages of them.
As far as the typical building materials go for Earthships, a lot of times they're using local dirt or sand to fill up bags or fill up tires or whatever's available. And unfortunately, we don't have a sediment material like that. Our land is rocky, and the rocks are pretty sizable because we're close to a volcano, or what used to be a volcano.
Oh, that's right. And that's what the kind of advantage of an Earthship is using recycled materials.
Right.
With all the glass bottle windows and things like that.
Yeah, but that's not as viable for us because we don't have... So what we could do, and what like Travis's neighbor did, is they dug out a big pit and used the sediment that they pulled out of the pit to fill the bags to build their Earthship. So then you have a sort of downstairs area that's kind of underground, and then you just fill up the walls with that material. But since we're working with so much rock, that'd be pretty difficult.
I watched a few weeks ago a hole being dug at our neighbor's house, and to rip through all of that rock layer by layer would be, we're working with straight rock.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that will be an option for us.
What we could do with the rock, though, is supplement our concrete as we're filling back cinder blocks and stuff, so that we don't have to use as much concrete. We could plop rocks in there, too, just to fill the space.
I saw somebody, as I was doing some research, who was filling the inside of the bricks with an insulation material. So the insulation is within the cement.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what would be best. That's kind of like the Earthship stuff, is figuring out why people make the moves that they do and then implementing them. Oh, something that I really, before I forget, I keep thinking about it. To drill a 50-foot little tunnel into the ground and then have a pipe coming up into our house so that we could have forever air conditioning.
Like geothermal.
That would be so cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to drill it straight down. We could, well, a lot of people use that for greenhouses too. They like dig down and then bury pipes in sort of a snaking like S formation, and then you put a fan on either side and you can circulate air that way. That's cooled by the earth. I think we should almost definitely use that. And then we're talking too about the solar hot water heater and running that. I don't know if we'll run it necessarily under our floor, because I don't think we'll need it with all the sun that we get warming up the concrete, but having some kind of using solar hot water for different things, I think would be really smart given all the sun that we have.
I saw an Earthship that had these windows that would open. They had a wax seal on them, and they would pop open when it got too hot. So it was like a very intelligent, super simple design where the house kind of keeps itself regulated. And that is something that these domes have.
Dang, that was
also.
a segue. That was sick.
I know. These domes that we're looking at that are built kind of near us, they have the same wax seal windows. So when it gets too hot in the dome, they'll just pop open. It's brilliant. And then they seal again when they get cool.
And a lot of you guys suggested us checking out Tyler and Todd's YouTube channel, which we have, and they're super cool. They live in a dome currently.
A big dome.
Yeah.
Geodesic dome.
We are still even considering short term using that as our main house structure, because then as we're building our actual house, we could use what would eventually become our greenhouse as our house.
We are not looking to have something nearly the size of theirs, though.
No.
Even for a greenhouse, I think that would be, we aren't on that. We'll never need that scale unless we started to sell the produce, and we could always get another bigger dome. But theirs is just incredible. It's
especially
huge.
Because we'll have some growing space in our house, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't wait to be able to just pull. Kale grows off like a center stalk. So then you can pull the leaves off and it will continue growing up and continuing to produce, versus like a lettuce where you cut the whole head off. I want to have plants like that inside so that we can continuously pull from them herbs and stuff.
After the dome, something that we've considered is containers, just like this container, because it ended up being a pretty awesome thing to work with if you can weld simply, and if you have a plasma cutter, then containers are a pretty viable option.
Something we were running into, though, is because there's no wood in here, you can't really just screw something in. We were kind of struggling putting this shelf up here up because there is no wood to drill into. We ended up kind of carving it into the foam and then making it work with other wood. But that was a hard thing, is you're only working with hard metal.
And the insulation is tough, because it ate by spraying spray foam. I think it was still one of the more viable insulation materials that we could have used, because it fills all the crevices and sort of waves in the container, but it ate away at our internal space a good bit, which is not ideal.
And if you were to get a container, a lot of people, what they do inside of their containers is they put up a stick frame kind of frame, then put their insulation inside of that, and then put drywall on the outside of that. And then at that point, it's kind of like you spent a ton of money on this container that is really small and not very adaptable, that you can't drill into easily. It's just a little bit complex when you could just put siding on the outside and call it good. There's more steps to it than that, but it's a bit of a complex thing if you don't have the correct tools to work with a container. And we don't.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a bad way to go by any means.
It's really strong, durable.
And you have all of your structural integrity just built into it. So once you lay the containers down, then you're kind of off to the races. It's just working with metal and cutting in windows and stuff is a little bit difficult. It's not at all impossible. And I know a lot of people will say it's easy, and it very well might be, but I don't know. It's not.
You might as well just make a wood house if you're going to add the inside. Pretty standard.
Yeah, unless you can get containers for cheap.
Yeah, which maybe will be able to happen soon.
Yeah, after the supply chain stuff gets ironed out. But out here, containers are expensive. So is wood, though. So I don't know. They make sense in some regard.
Yeah, I just watched our build video of this little office, and this little tiny container was $1,500, and we were looking at these wooden sheds that we couldn't find for less than $4,000. And so we thought this was a great deal, great option that was not wood.
And I think it worked out perfectly.
We couldn't have made it work without James and Doreen.
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, we could have made it work. It just wouldn't be nearly as cool as it ended up being.
So what about stick frame? Why? That's the most common kind of house material, house building method. What about that?
And when we first got into this, I didn't even know what that meant.
I know the log frame guy.
Yeah, he's like, stick frame house. And I'm like, what do you mean? Because my brain was on logs. I wasn't thinking like 2x4s, and calling those sticks, I think, is a little generous. So a stick frame is just a standard sort of house build with 2x4s or 2x6s as your main structure at like 16 inches apart or 14 inches apart, whatever it is.
It's a very cheap way to go.
Not
Cheap.
ish, right?
Well, not with wood prices. I mean, you can grow, these trees grow for 6 years and then they cut them down and you've got your really soft pine that you can work with. It's cheap. It goes up quick. Everybody has a hammer and a screwdriver. I was watching a bunch of videos on pros and cons of all these things, and that was something that they said is it's one of the most affordable ways to build a house in the quickest amount of time.
Yeah. So that said, why would we not want a stick frame house?
I guess kind of like I just mentioned, the wood is so soft, it would degrade quickly. I think we could upkeep a stick frame house easily. There's all the supplies are everywhere to maintain that. But I don't know, it just seems like it wouldn't be the most intelligent design, and we have the time and the space to be able to make this a really custom house that is exactly fit for our needs. So building a stick frame house that doesn't have very good insulation, doesn't retain heat as well as other options, it's kind of like, why do that?
I mean, you could build them to be pretty insulative, but at that point, then, and you're hanging drywall and doing the outside and everything, and at that point, it's like, why don't we just use one of these other building methods that we've talked about? And I think the other building methods are just more interesting.
Yeah,
I think that's
just more
like
unique.
A heavy part of it. Is It could be a lot cooler to build a more unique house.
Yeah, and we're going to put this whole thing on YouTube as we do with everything. And I think that people will be far more interested to see something that's not so status quo built. I think that will be more, in my opinion, that will be more interesting.
Another option is prefab homes, like single or double wide homes. And
yeah,
I
those
think,
are really common.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because you can just have it dropped off finished, which is pretty neat. But for the sake of YouTube and the fact that we do have a lot of time, I think it makes a lot more sense for us to spend a good bit of that time building rather than just having it dropped off. But if I was in a pinch for time and I was working a traditional job, then I think log cabins, a small log cabin or a prefab home would make sense because you can just have it delivered and finished. So then you could keep working and do your thing that way.
Absolutely. That's what our new friend Travis and Cora live in, is a single wide, and they made it look gorgeous.
It's amazing. Like when we got in there, it's just beautiful. I was totally blown away.
It looks so modern with all their furniture and the design of it.
And Philips Hue lights.
It's beautiful.
And it's all off grid. It's super cool. So that's another viable option. But for us, since we do have the time and like energy to dive into it, we can do it ourselves for probably a similar price or cheaper for something that's more permanent.
And permanence is something pretty huge because we want this land forever. Things could always change and we could sell it or whatever, but
unlikely.
I want to have a home that is bomb-proof and will last us a lifetime and beyond. Build a setup for our grandkids' kids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think concrete will last pretty well.
Speaking of things that last forever, yurts.
They do not last forever.
That was it.
That was a terrible
It was an inverse segue. It was a joke.
Oh.
Tight. Anyway, why or why not a yurt? We're thinking like that might be a useful thing. It wouldn't be for our main house necessarily, but a yurt for a gathering space or a yoga studio or a place to kind of have retreats, which we want to have in the future. I think a yurt would make a lot of sense for that kind of stuff. Just a communal area that we could have a wood stove and everybody could get together and hang out.
And if something happened, yurts are not permanent, so we could take it down, put it somewhere else, sell it. It's just a really customizable little space that is affordable. It seems like yurts and domes are kind of in the same category in my mind of a yurt has canvas sides, the ones we're looking at least, and a dome has not canvas, but similar kind of,
They hold a similar place in my brain.
yes.
But the yurts are far more portable. But the domes you can also use as a greenhouse. So, I don't know. They're pretty different from one another.
They're also both round. That's
Yeah,
a big one.
True. But I think they could both be useful for us, but not for our main living space.
And to spend 10 grand on a structure, currently, we really need to figure out our strategy going forward and what we're trying to do and what we need before we drop 10 grand on a structure, because that might be better served jumping straight into our house.
Yeah, like for septic or foundation or something like that. Another option, and some of our neighbors have actually used this, is straw bale. And I think that's a super interesting idea. As long as you build it really well and rodent proof it, because that's just, I don't know, that just makes me so nervous to think that if a rodent got through your stucco or whatever you have on the outside, then there's just a whole wall of straw for them to get into. And the idea of it rotting out too makes me really nervous if water were to get in. But if you build it really well, those wouldn't be problems, but it just makes me nervous.
Straw bale is cool because you kind of have a mud material on both sides of the straw bale. Then you've got a foot of insulation on the inside. That is a really efficient way to build. It's similar to cob, but different because the straw is mixed into the blocks. And I was really into cob in the beginning of this whole build thing. But again, we don't have the natural landscape to build with cob, so we're not going to do that.
Yeah. We might use the sort of principles of that for our stucco or to fill the inside of our insulation or whatever, but to make all that material from the wild out here would be near impossible.
Barndominiums are another kind of hot way to build right now, similar to the double wides. You get a pre-made barn from Home Depot and then insulate it and make it a house.
Not only from Home Depot, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting idea too if you're short on time, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Because
people make them pretty cool too, just like the single wide my friends have.
But then it's effectively done. Once you get, it's not effectively done. There's plenty of insulation and building
wiring.
out. Right. All that. You have to do a lot to make them finished, but it's a good starting point, which is definitely interesting. But it's, I don't know. I don't think it's any necessarily less permanent. You can get them built out really nice and with great materials, but I don't know. It's not as interesting to us, but I appreciate what people have done with it for sure. Yeah. So we talked about the insulation and exhalation thing, and then thermal batteries we kind of talked about. What we haven't dug into at all is the idea of using water in big tanks as a thermal battery. The only problem and we could use, so if we're planning on having a cistern in our house because our well is so low, and a cistern is just a big water tank. So if we had that in a place where it could absorb sunlight, then that would work as a pretty good thermal battery too. But in doing that, you just have the complexities of having a big water system that can leak and everything else. So it's kind of tough. But especially in our greenhouse, thermal battery with water, with some fish in it or whatever, I think would be a smart play.
Solar heated water on our roof at our house, I think is going to be huge. Maybe even through the floors.
Yeah, and to use that rather than, because if we're going to use, we're still trying to suss out is how much propane we'll use, or how much bigger we'll build our solar kit to accommodate different appliances and stuff. Because for our like cooking burners and oven and everything, if we're using electricity that'll eat a lot of electricity, whereas propane is a little bit more efficient for like warming things up.
But with propane, that is not a renewable resource.
And it's something that we have to rely on other people to come fill. So if we used, for our hot water, if we had even a small inline water heater, but then it's like we've not had running water at all for so long that it's, if we just used a kettle, like an electric kettle, to warm up water on demand like we do currently, I don't know why that would be problematic. And then we would just have running hot water from the solar hot water heater during the day. We just have to shower while it's still warm. I don't think that would be a ridiculous sort of
I guess
solution.
the idea of boiling a kettle of water every time I wanted to shower doesn't sound
No,
like...
not to shower, but just for your like normal everyday
Coffee.
use. Yeah, because our friends that we met at the hot springs have a solar hot water heater, and they say that the water gets like near boiling just from their water heater on their roof. So anytime the sun's out, and then well after that, because it would just be sitting in the pipes staying relatively warm, we could take our hot showers and use our hot water. But just if we had a blizzard, for example, for a few days, then our hot water heater wouldn't work as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we could still use the electric hot water heater and stuff supplementally. And we could even have an inline propane water heater for those times too.
If we are able to, I would like to have as big of a solar system as possible, so that we can, on cloudy days, have solar stored. We will be cognizant of our use on cloudy days. Like today, we wouldn't be going ham running a dishwasher. We're not going to have a dishwasher. We wouldn't be using the stove or anything, but I would love to have propane as a backup. And I know that our friends just suggested the opposite. Do propane as much as possible.
Yeah, it just depends on how you want to build it out. And then also we could have a big generator that is sort of, instead of a propane backup, we have a generator that makes electricity to power our things. And that's not a stupid solution either, because then you can charge up your batteries and everything off of that. So I don't know. There are lots of ways to do it, but we would like to make the build and
price is a factor too.
Totally.
Solar would be far more expensive than propane.
Yeah. But that's initially. But then once you have the solar kit set up, then
True.
But propane is pretty cheap. It's pretty affordable still. But we'd like to be as self-sufficient as possible.
I'm just hearing this last year there has been a shortage in propane and prices have been going up. So considering that for our future, it would be rad to kind of plan it mostly around solar and then use propane as a backup, or use propane to start and then plan on doing as much solar as we can later on down the road.
And given the sort of push toward renewable energy and away from fossil fuels, I think there will probably be subsidies and stuff for solar more than there would be propane. Like they'll probably start to tax propane and different fossil fuels more. So if we could get away from those, then that would probably save us money in the long run.
Our foundation is a really big thing that we haven't touched on.
Yeah. And my initial thought was I leaned toward the idea of like piers for our foundation, where they're just, I don't know how far you would have to stagger them apart. I guess it depends on how heavy the building materials you're using are. But you just dig down, put a concrete pier in, and then your house sort of sits on those. So then you don't have to have a solid block foundation, because a solid poured foundation just makes me nervous, because growing up in the Midwest, you have so much moisture and settling and freezing and thaws and everything that it seems like everybody's foundation cracks, and that's just a nightmare to deal with. But out here, since we're building on rock, our foundation probably won't settle very much. So having a poured concrete foundation is more viable than I otherwise would have thought. And then also being able to use it as a thermal battery makes a lot of sense. Did I miss anything?
We have to figure that out. We have a lot to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
But these are our current thoughts on all of this.
And the overarching idea with all this is to make it as passive as possible, so that we invest the energy and intellect on the front end, so that we can then not have to invest so much to heat and cool the house and everything as we use it. So
it'll be like the smart house from Disney.
Use that combined. It's like using old and new solutions. So yeah, using Arduinos and stuff to open up and windows and turn on and off fans and all that kind of stuff. But then also using sort of Earthship ideas and virtues to make it as passive as possible. I don't know. I don't know how much we'll really integrate Arduinos. I just think it'd be really cool to be able to...
I think we will. You have the knowledge of those things, so why not? If they would help us know how much water we have, let's do it.
And I think it'd be really cool in the greenhouse to be able to automatically kick on misters or whatever, depending on...
If we want to travel, if we want to go hunt in the scamp and stuff, we've got to be able to operate our greenhouse from an iPhone.
And since we'll have enough energy to do that, then, and all the sensors and everything you can buy pretty cheap.
I think it'll be way more than possible.
Yeah, it's not, it sounds crazy, but it's not as crazy as it sounds because you just need some simple input parameters to sort of monitor and modulate whether things are on and off. So I don't think, it sounds crazy, but I don't think it's as crazy as it sounds.
Well, we've got to go clean out our pipe on our wood stove so that we can light a fire.
And we're meeting with James tonight so we can talk about all of this stuff.
We've got some venison backstrap thawing in the scamp right now.
And tenderloin.
That we are going to be eating tonight. Again. We ate it last night.
We ate backstrap last night from one of the deer that we got earlier this year. And oh my goodness, it was delicious. I was surprised by how good it was. I thought it was going to be one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is really good, but also it's good because it's meat that we harvested ourselves. You know, like when you eat fish from the stream, it's like that you harvested. It would probably be better to get a big old salmon slab. So you kind of got to, I don't know, that makes it more delicious, but I feel like this was just objectively really delicious.
It was, you could chew through every bit of it, just break it. There's no gnawing at the steak.
No gristle or anything.
It was perfect. There were a couple pieces that were undercooked, so then you cooked them longer, and then they got a little overcooked. But if you cook them right,
But I'm cooking them on a cast iron, which is...
the best. In bacon grease.
It's really good, but it's hard to cook thicker steaks and stuff.
I think just in general, it's hard to cook thicker steaks.
Yeah. But if you have like a smoker that's a cooler temperature, but you run it for longer, I think a smoker is definitely a thing that we'll have in the near future. That and an Instant Pot. And then the sous vide is another interesting way to cook. But an Instant Pot, like, we need to order that because we have a bunch of roasts and stuff to cook too. But maybe as we figure this out, we can do a whole podcast on
we could do a podcast and be making our roast in here. And like for the first time, do a podcast making our first roast in the Instant Pot.
Soon.
Sold. Okay.
Yep, that's all for today, right?
Yes. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.